So this is going to be a solution to problem 5-95. This is from our first week off. This is one of the practice problems. In 595, we're given a function and its inverse. Remember that the -1 symbol is the inverse symbol. And we are supposed to answer the question for each of these of what is the domain and range, and then, if needed, restrict the domains so that they are inverses of each other. Now, if you were to graph this, this would be 1/2 of a sideways parabola. That's why it's still a function. So what we're going to do, looking at this, remember that domain is the set of all possible x values. Since this has a square root in it, the number underneath this, so that this is going to get a real number value, this has to be 0 or bigger. So to figure out the domain, we're going to ask the question, what makes 7 minus x greater than 0? And quickly solving that, opposite of x is greater than -7, divide by -1, and remembering when you multiply or divide by a negative number, you're going to reverse the sign and the inequality. So you're looking for numbers where x is less than 7. Actually, I guess it can be equal to, I'm sorry. So your domain then is all x values less than or equal to 7. Now your range, or the smallest this can be, is 0. So if we're going to take 0 as the smallest number and subtract 6 from it, that means that your y values all have to be greater than or equal to -6. That would be the 0 minus 6. It would be the lowest output you could get for f of x. Then we'll do the same thing for the inverse of f of x. Looking at this, are there any restrictions that we need to put on x? No, because no matter what real number you put in for x, you square it, you're still going to get a real number. So the domain for this would be x was all real numbers. Now, looking at this, this is in graphing form. So you've got a, h, and k. In this case, the vertex is at -6, -7, and a is -1, which means it's a downward pointing parabola. So it's doing something like that, which means that this vertex is the highest point that this can be. So then your range is going to be y less than or equal to 7. The second part of A asks, are there any restrictions we have to make sure that the two are inverses of each other? Well, this is a full-blown parabola. So if we reflect it over the line y equals x, you're going to get a sideways parabola, which not what we're looking for, because that's not a function. The one we had in there was only half of that function. And noticing that the range was greater than, this one is going to be the top half of that function. So really, this can only be, if this is the top half, so this is now 7, -6 is where that's going to be, because you switch your x and your y's for your inverses, going sideways, and then it's going up from that. But let's see, is this pointing right or left? Looks like it's probably going to be pointing left because of the -x. So you want to restrict your x's. Oh no, it's going to be right. Only for, and notice what happened here, the range and the domain of these two switched, which is what happens in an inverse. So the range and the domain is going to switch for these. So our restriction needs to be the x is greater than or equal to -6 for this one. so that it will only be this side of the parabola, so that we just get the top side of the original one. Part B asks you to predict the output of f negative 1 of f of a, remembering that these two inverses should undo each other. We should predict that whatever you put into the first one is what you're going to get out of the second one, because it's undoing everything. Then we're supposed to prove that algebraically, which means we could take what f of a is, which is this up here, and plug it in for f negative 1. So f negative 1 of opposite of x plus 6 squared plus 7 is going to be the square root of 7 minus that whole thing. You need to put an extra set of parentheses there because we've got a big expression that we're putting in there. So remember that whatever's inside here is what replaces the x up there, and then a minus 6 on the outside. So it's going to be the square root of, oh no, I had that in the right place. That's got to be there, not that one. This is just one. Opposite of the opposite is plus. X squared, x plus 6 squared is x squared plus 12x plus 36. And then minus 7, because I had to distribute this whole thing through there. The 7 here and the negative 7 there add up to 0. So that means we're really just going to be left with this piece here. So really what we have is the square root, I'm going to go back to factored form, of x plus 6 squared minus 6. Oop. You know what I didn't do right? I didn't substitute the a on there right. So each of these x's should be an a. See, even when I'm doing videos, I make mistakes still. Minus 6. The square root of that is, I'm going to move paper up, absolute value of x plus 6 minus 6. Now we were restricted our domain, so we are only looking at the positive version of this, which means we don't have to worry so much about the absolute value. So it's just a plus 6 minus 6, and so yes, algebraically we see that we actually got a.